Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. Today is Monday, October 8th, 2018. We're at the Oregon School District's Innovation Center at the high school. Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Feeney?
Present.
Ms. Oderico?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Mr. Kraus?
Yo.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zach?
Present. The board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law and leave those notices with Ms. Heights if anyone wants to inspect them. Our agenda tonight contains our standard items. For action items, we're going to receive the Youth Sports and Athletics Task Force report from the Visioning Committee. We have a contract for the School to Career program, approve the school calendar for 1920, and we have a recommendation from policy on the drug and alcohol policy, and then informational items. I'll need a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Item A, consent calendar. Is any item on the consent calendar that anyone wishes to have removed? And I'll note that at your desk is an additional field trip request from the FFA, and that would be included for approval this evening.
I would just like to note that since I was not here at the August 20th meeting, which is the minutes that we're going to be either approving or not, that I will just not ask to remove it, but just not vote on that one. So abstain.
Yep, pursuant to our practice, you can vote on the consent calendar with a notation that you've abstained relative to that item. So, anything else? Then I need a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
And Barb Feeney with the second. All those, we don't have any contracts there, do we? Nope. All those in favor of the, to approve the items on the consent calendar signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries with Dan noted as being abstained. I would note that that included donations, two donations, one from Oregon Youth Football in the amount of $3,000 and then from the Oregon Athletic Boosters in the amount of $1,120 for soccer bags, and we thank them for their contributions. Item B, communication from the public. Board policy 18004 establishes the opportunity for the public to address the board. Has any registered, Ms. Heights? Is there anyone in the audience from the community who wishes to speak this evening? Anyone in the audience here last time? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll move to item C, informational items. OEA report. Nate, nothing tonight. I'll note that Nate and I and Brian, we had a good meeting with the leaders meeting, and I think Brian might report on that. Student report. Hi, Emily.
Hello.
How's things going in high school?
Well, homecoming week has come to an end, and that was a really fun week, and the dance was really successful, so that was a lot of fun. We had a speaker today at school. It was like the Mike Ramesh. He's like a speaker about like consent, and yeah, it's called like Date Safe. So he came today, and I think it was well received. The
Pretty
students
timely.
seemed to like it. Yeah.
Pretty timely. Good.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a good
Great.
assembly.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
That takes us to item D, action items, the Youth Sports and Athletics Task Force report. Courtney, you want to do a brief intro on that?
Sure. So Vision Steering Committee met on August 21st with the sole purpose of hearing from the Youth Sports and Athletics Task Force regarding their work of the prior year. And the meeting was well attended. I think several board members were there, although not all board members. So when we received that report, we made the decision at the committee level to bring the whole report to the full board so that everybody could hear what they had to say, what they learned in their work. The task force was chaired, as most of you know, by Krista Flanagan and Mike Carr, and the membership was made up of several community leaders in youth sports and administrators and others. Am I forgetting anyone else? Pretty much that. The report we're going to hear that report tonight from Krista and Mike, and I don't know if any members of your task force are here. Oh, good. So some community members of the task force are here as well. And once we have heard their report, I think we'll open up the floor for some discussion, but we would like to discuss afterwards next steps and possibly make some motions to the effect of implementing some of the recommendations. So with that, I would introduce Krista and Mike and say, I don't know if you guys want to come over here or how you want to take this, but the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. I think Mike's going to come up, but I'd also like to recognize the task force members that are here because we had I think Mike will agree, we had an amazing task force, as Courtney said. It was administrators, teachers, community members, parents, people that run are presidents of youth sports organizations, so we feel like we had a really good representation. So Eric Anderson is here tonight, Dave Jamison, Tim Erickson, Don Goltz. Is that it? But I'd also like to note the other people that were on the task force. Kelly Pierce, who's a teacher at Room Corners, and the head cheer coach, Jake Soul, who's a teacher at Room Corners, and head baseball coach, Sydney Weiss, who's a teacher at Oregon Middle School and head softball coach, as well as John Breitenbach, Don Koopman, Heather Kugel, and Sarah Tarantino. So I think Mike and I are going to kind of walk you through just briefly some of the information that's in the report. I'll kind of talk through the first part, and then Mike's going to take talking about the Youth Sports Summit we held and the recommendations. That works? So first of all, why did we do this? I think it's pretty clear from our values that we understand as a school district, and it's been boards before us, that what happens outside the classroom is just as important as what happens inside the classroom, that we know that sports provides a learning experience for our students, and that it's very important in terms of what those experiences are like and who is educating kids in those experiences. So there was a task force back in 2005, and given that it's been quite a while since this has been looked at and the industry is changing, the board authorized another task force in 2017 to, number one, look at the recommendations that came from the 2005 task force, look at the purposes, shared values, and expectations that we have for youth sports organizations and athletic programs in our district, that they are based in education, and then really look at what do we want as future outcomes and best practices in our district about these athletic programs and youth sports organizations, and what are the cooperative opportunities and collaborations that can occur between the programs. And then also one of our values, equity. Are we ensuring that all the kids that want to participate can participate, and we're taking away the barriers of why they don't participate? So that was really why the task force was formed. As is common in our district, we start with research. There's a lot of research out there about what is happening in athletic programs and youth sports organizations. And so we really looked at 4 areas, which you'll see on the next slide. Participation costs, as you read the report and look at the data, what's happening in this country is youth sports is becoming big business. And so what that's done is organizations are really pushing competition at younger ages, and it's costing families more. So like a lot of things in this country, it's becoming the haves and have-nots. And when it's something like sports, where it's such a valuable experience, it's problematic when not every child can participate. The next thing that's happening is sports specialization and cessation. So as you saw in the report, not only are kids specializing earlier, meaning they're not doing multi-sports, they're picking one sport, but 7 out of 10 kids have quit organized sports completely by the time they get to high school. And so we know benefits of sports is not only things that kids can learn, but it's also about physical activity and having kids have that as a habit. So we know that incidences of obesity are growing in this country like crazy too. So it's problematic if kids are stopping organized athletic activity before they reach high school. We also saw in the research that parents are a huge part of the athletic and youth sports experience, and that there can be a disconnect in terms of a parental expectation and what a child wants out of sports. The number one reason, it's been surveyed over and over again, the number one reason that kids participate in sports is to have fun with their friends. And that is not always a parent expectation. And I think all of us are guilty of that at one point in time as kids participate in sports. But one of the things we did was show a video, and it came away with the concept of when your kid participates, it's, I love watching you play. That's the whole point of having a kid in sports, is saying, I love watching you play. And so that's a reminder, me included, of really what we should be doing in terms of supporting our kids. And then there's also research out there from Canada kind of led the way, but now the U.S. Olympic Committee and other entities are saying we really need to educate ourselves and parents about what are the developmental levels that kids should have in sports. So what is the point when they're kindergarten through third? It's having fun and learning the game, and as you move forward, it's fundamentals. And as the body develops, there are different things that should be expectations in sport, and so that's a really important concept. Now, no matter the sport, no matter the organization, that there are really baseline measures of what the point is at that age. And then finally, coach training, that it's really important that we treat coaches as educators and give them the training, not only safety and health, but how to manage a team, how to coach the fundamentals of the sport. And that's really lacking, as well as there's a large percentage of coaches that are male, so there are not enough female coaches out there. And when you look at different sports, it's really important that there are more females that are coaching sports. So that was really the research that we looked at. And then I will turn it over to Mike for participation data and task force recommendations.
Thank you. So as most of you know, a significant number of our students participate in sports activities because we offer about 25 different sports programs between the high school and the middle school. And as you can see from the numbers, about 45% of our students last year participated in at least one sport during the school year, and 44% of our kids in the middle school participated in at least one sport. So we know that there's a real value and a real interest in offering the different athletic programs that we offer at OHS and OMS. So after we boiled all the things down, and we had a sports summit, which was part of our research. We had about 90 parents, students, parents, community members, interested people that came to 2 different nights that we had in February to talk about youth sports in Oregon. I think the fantastic thing, and I think Krista would agree, that we had 90 people the first night, which is always a good thing, but we had the same 90 people the second night, which was 2 weeks later. And if you can bring almost 100% of those people back, they were definitely engaged and interested in what we were talking about. So we were really happy with that. That was part of the 4 points that we just talked about. So we boiled these down, we came back to the task force, and we came up with three recommendations, 3 things that we feel that we can implement change with very soon, and also have measurables. So the first one is that we will, we'd recommend that we do a school district-wide survey of all of our students, pre-K, 4K to 12, about participation, non-participation, why did you start, why did you quit, what are you interested in, those sort of things, because I think we can really get a pulse on what people want and what people like and what people don't like, and we can identify kind of those big rocks to kind of work on those things. We want to benchmark those things, and we want to be able to also, with the anticipated growth that we have, look at maybe new programs or how we can manage the different constituencies that we have going forward. So what we're recommending that we do is that we partner with an outside research firm to help create that survey and send that survey out this winter. So that's kind of our first recommendation, is to really get a pulse on all of our school district families to see what their opinions, interests, dreams, hopes, wishes are, so we can at least form some benchmarks and go from there. The second recommendation that we are recommending is that we create a consortium of both students and parents. So basically what we would do is, the thing that's pretty unique to Oregon is we don't have a rec department, so we don't have one governing body that supervises all the different sports that we offer. Each sport is almost their own entity. So what we would like to do is create this consortium of our youth programs, so we can look at benchmarking, we can look at equity, we can look at coaching training and make some of those things more consistent. Because I think one of the things I met with a consultant today who I think we're going to partner with, especially for my coaches, would be so many times we talk about teachers as coaches, right? We have coaches that teach in the classroom and we call them coaches. The other thing that we need to make sure that we start doing is calling our coaches teachers. So, I mean, we use those words interchangeably, and I think that's really important. So what we really want to do, and I will take the lead on this, with the youth sports organization leaders, is to create a consortium so we can have more of a unified message, more of a unified experience to at least help each other do things better. So that would be our second recommendation. And then the third recommendation is that we create an advisory council that helps. A lot of times parents don't know what it's like to be a sports parent. So how are we going to help educate them, give them the tools? The consultant I met with today talked a lot about, a lot of times, especially at the high school level, coaches might say one of their barriers sometimes is parents, and parents will say one of their barriers with their students are their coaches. So how can we get those two aligned, and how can those two be allies? So what we really want to do is make sure that we can educate our parents K-4 or pre-K to 12 on what it's like to be a sports parent, how we can be more supportive, how we can better that experience for those kids that are involved. So that would be, we would create a parent advisory council and look to do that this winter. I think we have some people in the room that would be interested in doing that. So that would be our third recommendation. So we have three recommendations that I think they're not going to be easy, but they are measurable and they do have some action steps. So that's really important, because I think one of the things that came out of the 2005 report was there was some mission creep. They had all this really good information and then it didn't go anywhere. So we wanted to make sure that we had three things that we could take somewhere, get some measurables, and gather some data and some evidence to show that here's what we're finding and here's how we can go forward.
A couple other things. One was a good sign that we received an email from David Knight, who's at UW Sports Performance Center, saying, wow, you guys are working on exactly what I'm working on at UW, so we'd love to meet with you and talk with you about what you're doing. And he's got gobs and gobs of research and things that he's done. So Mike and I and Tim Erickson, who's going to head up the Parent Advisory Council with his friends over there, Dawn and Dave, we'll be meeting with him to kind of talk about, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so we can see what he's been doing and how we can partner together. We've also had contacts from other schools. McFarland is an example of, wow, I can't believe you guys actually got people to come to a youth sports summit 2 nights in a row. Can we have your findings and see how we can model what you're trying to do there? So so that's been exciting for us. But it's going to be hard work, and we know that there are a compendium of things that we could have picked, but we wanted to pick things that we thought we were able to move the needle on, and were things that we could actually make happen. So it's not to say that there aren't other things that can be taken on in the future, but we felt these were the most important at this time.
Anybody have any questions of Mike or Krista? Okay, Barb.
I just have a couple things. One is, I think I commented on the first draft of the paper, and my comment was, it would be interesting to find out in your survey process if there might be interest on the part of students who don't want to participate in the formal organized sports, in having opportunities to participate in a more informal kind of sports activity, whether it be volleyball or soccer. And I guess one of the things it's worth thinking about, the youth survey data showed that a lot of students are dealing with issues of anxiety and depression, and one of the stated reasons for that is pressure from school and schoolwork. And I do wonder if sports has just become another high-pressure environment for kids. And one way to deal with that is to try to tone it down a little bit and ask parents to tone it down a little bit too. But another thing to look at is whether more informal kinds of venues would be of interest to kids who don't want to be in the formal sports, be on a formal team, and have that kind of high-pressure environment. And then another thing that I would like to see tracked at some point is the whole issue of head injuries, and have some assurance that not just our school district, but the other sports organizations are paying attention to the issue of head injuries, following the research, and if necessary, dealing with potential harm from head injuries.
That's something we currently do now. We do the baseline test for those students that want to do that. And then we do track those, and we do follow up with their physicians. So we do that definitely at the high school level.
Yeah, I think it's important that we, the school district, stay on top of what the research is saying about head injuries. And, you know, at some point, whether it's changes in equipment or changes in playing style, I understand that now, not as a sponsorship of the school, but through another organization, younger, like middle school kids are starting to play tackle football. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying, you know, this lengthens the period of exposure young kids are having to potential concussions, and it's just something we really need to be paying attention to.
Well, and I think one of the things that we've been doing with the coaching education is being more vigilant with that. I think the other thing that we're doing is, especially a sport like football, is using the more heads up, tackle up philosophy. So they are changing the way that they're doing things. And I just met with Cindy Strike today, who's our athletic trainer from UW Health. And she said, even in our game Friday night, we had a young man who didn't have a concussion, but his teammates were worried that he might have a concussion. So they're more aware of that. And they went to her and said, Sydney, you need to look at this student athlete to just make sure. So that didn't happen 10 or 15 years ago. You just played and you kept, you know, quiet, and you didn't do that. So I think we're doing as much as we can, and we can do more to make sure that we're very aware of that.
And I think to your other point, Barb, we actually spent a lot of time talking about organized versus less organized, because the model I think a lot of us talked about is when we were kids, you maybe were playing basketball, but it'd be, okay, everybody show up at the gym at Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and you just played. And so I actually want Dawn to maybe speak briefly. Dawn is actually doing quite a bit of that, has started to do some of that at Prairie View with a running club on Friday mornings. So Dawn, I don't know if you just want to briefly kind of share with Barb some of the things that you've tried out this year that are unorganized.
Running club is offered. We have a paraprofessional and an OT staff member who want to really help kids be active. So at 7:15 on Fridays in 6-week sessions, students can come. It's from 2nd grade through 4th grade. We had 70 kids the other day come to running club. Parents drop off at 7:15. We provide a snack after they're done running, but from 7:15 till 7:45, the kids kind of stretch, and then they run either outside on the sidewalk or in the halls of the school, which are kind of fun for the kids to be able to run in the school. And they play music in the gym, and they do different, if they're inside, they do different movement things in the gym while the kids run through. We have parent volunteers that help as well. And so we did 3 sessions, I believe, last year, and then it ended with a fun run at the end of the year at the park.
That's great, and I think, you know, one of the things to just be paying attention to is there going to be gym time available for less organized activities in high school?
Well, and I think one of the other things that has even bubbled out of this so far is youth basketball has changed their model as far as how they've done their little kids, their 1st and 2nd graders, and we're moving them to the high school this winter, where they're going to practice for a couple hours on a Saturday morning, and that's the only time they have to go, which cuts down on going Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever those nights are. And then it's a more condensed schedule, because I think that's more family friendly, and we're going to work on fundamentals, and it's going to be more fun, and it's going to be those sort of things. So I think we've already got a lot of movement from the people that we've worked with through this process that have already started to change the way they've been thinking.
And that's why we kind of started big, because there were, as you read through the report, you'll see all the action ideas that came from the summit, but we kind of took them up a level and said, okay, that is an impact, or it's kind of a cause and effect, that if we get to this place of, soccer is one of the more mature organizations in town, and they, from their national governing body, and they've started locally of kind of this, what's appropriate at what level, and there's a standard of you shouldn't be practicing more hours than your age in years. And so if we can get more mature clubs and having this consortium, and we all agree about that stuff, then these things that are causing problems may go away, because we've started up here with education and principles. So your points are very, very well taken, and that's kind of our hope, is that we start here and get agreement, and then some of these things will not be solved, but they'll tend to go away because we've said, no, this is how we're operating.
That's kind of a good segue to my question, which is on recommendation number 2, which is the consortium. How do you envision that being formed? Is that something that every youth sports organization will have a representative on, and it will meet regularly, or how do you envision that kind of playing out?
Right now, I hope that we would invite all leaders in the youth sports to participate, and I would think we could probably meet a couple times a semester, or at least 4 times a year, to check in and do those sort of things. So yeah, we would like to have everybody at the table, because we want to give everybody a voice.
Any other questions? I know I was at the committee meeting when this was reported into the committee, and a couple of the phrases that were used at that time talked about educationally based athletics. I mean, why was the Oregon school district involved in this? And I think it stems from the fact that we're committed to a co-curricular program that's educationally based, which is one of the reasons why we don't charge user fees, is because we feel it's part of our curriculum. Outside of that, but that also extends if we have that many of our students in youth sports programs, we ought to at least have some influence in terms of making sure they're educationally backed. The other language that we heard was that we should be the culture keepers, and that we need to develop a culture. And then, since we're the district, we're here all the time, whereas parents come in and move through, and so you have to keep the culture going. And so we're the best party involved in terms of maintaining that culture. So this was something that I had been involved in 10 years ago when we had a similar task force, and it had a lot of good recommendations, but just never quite got to the implementation phase in terms of, I think there are pretty similar recommendations in this report in terms of doing the consortium and also an advisory council. So I think that's really good. In terms of implementation, are we looking at, Courtney or Krista, just an approval from the board to authorize the facilitation of a survey? And who would do that? I'm assuming that Visioning still maintains some jurisdiction oversight of this, or not?
I mean, we hadn't really discussed whose jurisdiction it was, but I think the expectation was that, yes, tonight we would seek approval for at least recommendation number 1, which is the survey.
Okay.
And then, I guess the first thing we could do is I could move to receive the report from the task force if you want me to do that. Okay,
Yep.
So I would say on behalf of the Vision Steering Committee, I move that we receive the report from the Youth Sports and Athletic Task Force.
Second to that motion?
Second.
Dan with a second. Any discussion? Just on the receipt?
Dan's got his hand up.
I just want to say that this report it's a great report. I enjoyed reading it. I learned a lot. I think that it's relevant to our kids, and I think it's a very important thing that is done, and just very happy with the result.
Thank you.
Discussion? Okay. All those in favor of receiving the report signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries. Then I think we need to go.
Well, I think what maybe would be beneficial would be to take each recommendation separately, and then I can make a motion specific to each recommendation, if that's
Yep, why don't you?
okay. Okay, so relative to recommendation number 1, I would move that the board approve the admission of a survey to happen in the next 6 months, 3 months? Do you have a feeling? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I would say sooner rather than later.
Okay, so let's set a 3-month deadline for the beginning of the survey to be administered by the school district with the aid of a professional survey.
And who would be involved in developing the study? Would it be the task force or the vision committee, or?
My feeling is that it should be the task force, since they have the expertise, but we could form a committee, a sort of subcommittee, if that would be the desire of the task force, including a member of the vision steering committee, since the board is
Yeah, I mean, would it be
gonna have the
just
oversight.
reconvene the task force and those members interested in it with someone from the visioning committee?
I think we could do a subgroup, because as you'll see from the Parent Advisory Council, we kind of have a subgroup that's going to form that, and then Mike's got the piece. So I would say a subgroup of the task force to work specifically with Mike on the survey.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion would be to authorize a survey to be developed by a subgroup of the
Correct.
task force with someone from visioning committee, and to develop that and then to receive the survey responses and
And report back to the board.
report
Okay.
back to the board.
Yes, that's my motion.
Got that?
Thank you.
I don't know that we need a second, because that's coming out of. Okay. Any discussion regarding that? The motion is to do the survey with the subcommittee and a member of the visioning committee. Dan?
I noticed that this is proposing that we work with an outside firm, and I was wondering where the budget would be for that, which firm we were going to use. That's my first concern. The second one is the wording of recommendation number 1 towards the end of the long first sentence, to determine goals for the future. Is that part of the surveys to determine goals for the future? Is that something that we can use the survey for? I would think that survey would be more of raw data, and that we could use the raw data to, as a body, determine goals for the future, if that could be clarified.
I think what we intended is the last part of that sentence, that we would use survey data to benchmark participation. So in terms of using data, in terms of what we hear in the survey, based on why kids are participating, why they're not, what are the barriers, who wants to participate, and then we would use that to benchmark participation numbers to then determine goals from those benchmarks, is my interpretation of what that was.
And so would that work be done then by the subcommittee that was working on the survey, or would that work be done by the task force reconvening?
So, for example, who we would probably work with is school perceptions, who the school district has worked for before, who Mike works with to do surveys at the end of seasons to parents about coaches. And they've also done a similar survey, just done it with Middleton Cross Plains School District. So they have the expertise in developing the survey. We would work with them to make it specific to maybe our needs, and then work with them to develop benchmark and participation numbers, because they've done that for other school districts and they have the research in that. But that we would certainly say, okay, here's what they recommend, but here's Oregon School District, and here's what we believe or what we would like that to be. So that potentially could come back before the board in terms of a goal, or that would be something that would come from administrative. That would be an administrative responsibility, like they do for goals for buildings or.
And budget-wise, we've got the funds to do the survey then from our budget?
Yes, we have funds to do it.
Okay.
We'll take it out of the athletic budget.
Any other questions? Okay, we've got a motion to authorize the survey to be overseen by subcommittee of the task force and a member of the Visioning Committee. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Courtney, number 2.
Number 2, on behalf of the Vision Steering Committee, I would move to authorize Mr. Carr to form a consortium to collaborate and develop best practices, shared beliefs, and information processes in the area of coach presentation and coach preparation and training, communication to families, and concept of age-appropriate development seasons. That's my motion.
Any comments or questions regarding that recommendation and motion? And that's one that I think gets to the core of it in terms of where I'm at, is that there were some best practices outlined in the report from about 10 years ago. There are some real significant questions out there about year-round sports. When do you specialize? When do you segregate teams by ability? That sort of stuff that I think goes to the heart of that. And I think it's the intent that you are looking at those. Okay, so that's really important to me because I think that's where there's the rub out in the community.
I think one thing, Courtney, I think we would like is for you to maybe put a report back element to both 2 and 3, that the board would hear progress.
Right. Do we want to set a timeline on that? Yeah. I would take your advice, Chris, as to what a reasonable amount of time for that would be.
I think, Mike, if you're planning on maybe meeting 2 times per semester, maybe we could look at before the school year is out, that you come back to the board and give a report on the progress that's been made to date.
Sure.
That seem acceptable?
Yep.
Okay. So you could add that to my motion with the expectation that we would receive a report from the consortium by the end of the school year.
Any further comments, Tim?
And again, that's using best practices and research that's already been done as opposed to going out and getting more research, right? There's not a budget element to this.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I would assume that you'd be looking at the results of the survey too, and when you report back. Yep. Good. Any other? Okay. Seeing no further questions, the motion is to authorize Mike Carr to form a consortium to look at items as set forth in the recommendation there and report back by the end of the year, school year. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Courtney.
Okay, and then relative to recommendation number 3, on behalf of the Vision Steering Committee, I move to create an advisory council, a parent advisory council, with the charge that's outlined in the recommendation in the report. And again, Chris, I guess I would ask you, do we want to set a time parameter on that in terms of a report from that council, or how would you see that being structured?
Yeah, I think I'll turn to Tim. Do you have a recommendation in terms of when you think the council can get going? It would be appropriate for you to, because I know you're going to be working on the framework of what that council looks like, that you would come before the board and kind of share with us that. What's a good time frame, do you think, for that?
Yeah, if you're looking for a framework and kind of a sustainability outline, I would say by March is probably reasonable.
Okay, so would it be acceptable to add to that motion that we would then hear from the Parent Advisory Council in March at the full board, or would that be something that we would want to hear maybe back at Vision Steering Committee?
Yeah, I think that would be something that's probably vision steering, and then you could come to the board with both of the things by the end of the school year.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Did you get that, Katie?
So just for clarification, the advisory council is going to be sort of under the umbrella of the consortium, or is it going to be kind of a school board, school district advisory council? And I'm just thinking about where the leadership comes from and the organization for meetings and all that stuff.
I think that's why what Tim talked about is coming back before the vision steering with a framework, so that then the vision steering can look at that and say, and he'll come with recommendations about what that model looks like. So it's really, now they're going to go back and kind of look at how should this be structured, or what does it look like? How is it in relation to the youth sports organization and the school district? And then vision steering can have that kind of purview over that, is my assumption.
Everybody clear on that? So the motion is to authorize the creation of an advisory council that's going to report back to the Vision Steering Committee in March about structure and mechanics and process, stuff like that. Any questions about that? Okay, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Do we have any further work on this?
No further work, but I would just like to thank Krista and Mike and all the members of your task force for a lot of meaningful and hard work that I think will help move the needle on the culture of youth sports and athletics in the district. I think it's really, really important stuff. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
The board dittos that, and like Krista mentioned, I think we're out ahead of the curve on this, and so it'd be really encouraging to see the result of this as we follow through with it in March and at the end of the year. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Krista. That takes us to action item D2, which is contract 660301 school to career program for 2018-2019. And is that you, Brian?
This is a standard shared service agreement that we have entertained with the districts that we participate on the school to work program. I think many of you know I am one of the 4 superintendents that oversees the school to work program. It is, the fiscal agent is the Monona Grove School District, and there's really very little change from the previous year. We continue to be one of the 15 plus districts that has one of the highest enrollments in the school to work program. It would include McFarland, Oregon, Wanakee, and Monona Grove. And the 4 of us superintendents serve on the oversight committee, mostly because no one else in Dane County has volunteered to serve on the oversight committee, but we do it happily.
And Gina, have you looked at this contract? Does it meet your legal approval? It does. Okay. Does anyone from the board have any questions of Dr. Bussler or Gina about this? Tim?
Doctor, you said that we have the highest participation in that program. Can you give us just an idea of what the participation is, and is it growing, or has it been just a high participation level for some time?
It's ranged anywhere between 40 to 60 students, and this year we're in that mid-50s. So we have seen pretty, I'll say steady 4, 5, 6 students a year, but over the years some districts really go through quite a slide in terms of participation. Ours has always been really strong. And one of our most popular programs is the biotech program with Promega.
Are you part of the program?
I am, yeah.
Here, tell us about it. Tell us what you do.
So I work as a certified nursing assistant at Beehive Homes. It's a memory care facility here in Oregon. So last year, through the program, I took a hybrid course through MATC. It was actually at Stoughton. They have a lab in their classroom. So I went through the program and got my certified nursing assistant certification. And then, so this year I'm done after 7th hour and I go to work. So I really like it. It's a great opportunity.
So you're recommending that we approve this contract?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, then I would entertain a motion to approve. Yeah, Tim.
The CNA program, one of our daughters got into the CNA program after high school. And I can tell you that it's an expensive program. It's a very valuable program, but I think the cost of it was somewhere between $1,300 and $1,600 for a month-long, 6 days a week program. And she regretted not having done it in high school because, as you can attest, the cost is significantly different. And it's really the same program. And so it serves a very valuable purpose, not only for the students, but for places like Beehive, who have folks like Emily participating in their building every day.
I interpret your comments as a motion in favor of approving the contract?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I would move to approve that contract.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Dan?
It's interesting, Emily, that you're a part of that program. Tessa Riley also was a part of the program, who was one of our student members of the school board, and she got a lot out of it. She worked for me at my firm. The program has really been shepherded well by Bill Urban first, I think, at least when I first came in touch with the program, who's now retired, and Greg Granberg, both doing really great jobs with it. And I'd love to see this program keep going.
Any other comments? Thanks, Dan. Okay, could you call the roll since it is a contract?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. You can continue at Beehive. Very good. Takes us to action item D3, school calendar. And Gina, is this you? Okay, you have the floor.
Okay, so Brian Bussler asked if I would put together to hand out tonight how I start looking at the calendar. So I have a handout for all of you. So I'll give introductory comments while you're looking at that. This is my 7th calendar that I've put together, and our responses are great from our parents and staff that we survey. We received 825 survey responses. 85% of our responses have children in the district, and 230 staff members responded, which is about 35% of the staff. And that is very typical participation for us. The survey results was in your board packet, so I do one survey because I have many staff who are also parents in the district, and I don't want to skew the data, so I do one survey of all, and then I filter it by parent only and then by staff only to see if there is a difference. And 99% of the time there is not. If there is a difference, then I highlight that for you in the packet. In terms of the calendar, more staff than not preferred that we have 2 professional development days in August. We did have discussions with the OEA about moving to 3 days in August. Some years we do 2, some we do 3. And we felt that for the 1920 calendar that we would stay with the 2 days in August. As you can imagine, educators are very anxious to get into their classroom that week and not necessarily have professional development programming before school starts. So we stayed with that theme for the 1920 school year. I did ask about this. We have been very dedicated to having our professional development days throughout the school year. We feel that that is more conducive to learning if you have something consistently throughout the year as opposed to all before or all after school. Additionally, that gives teachers time to learn and practice what they've learned in the classroom and reflect on it and engage and refine their practice. And so that's something that I know Dr. Bergstrom and the administrative team feel very strongly about. That is our practice. So in looking at where we place those professional development days, because we know that can be a hardship for families when school is not in session, we do survey about that every year. And 70% of families and 55% of staff have told us to have those around a holiday or a break, that is easier for them. Additionally, I will mention I am very appreciative of Amy Miller and her department because they do offer programming on those days during the school year, usually for K4 or K6, so that the families that are looking for things for their children to do on those days have a fun activity that is supervised in school. So I'm very appreciative of that. And we did continue our recommendation with the 1920 calendar that we have the seniors graduate a few days early than the rest of the high school. So this is Emily smiling. This is the first year that we are piloting that, and obviously we need to approve a calendar before we see how that works. But we feel that that will be successful this year. So we did continue that in our recommendation for 1920. And then in terms of I put 2 calendars together for people to consider just so they could see what it looked like. So we had calendar A and calendar B, and you'll see that in your packet. But I do tell folks when we survey them that we take their feedback very seriously. So often the final calendar is some hybrid of the 2. So some other themes from the survey that I did just want to bring to your attention is that numerous people, and you will see that comment, that they very much thank the board for asking their input into the calendar. I did learn that I need to do a better job of communicating with people in the community that were not able to start school before September 1. There are probably a dozen comments that would like us to start in August. I think many of us would like to do that too. I did share with the board that the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, their lobbying person, he has lobbied on that because many school districts want to start before September 1, and they have not been successful thus far in getting that state law changed, but they are continuing to try that. One thing that came up this year that I haven't seen before that I did just want to share with you is that there were a handful of parents that asked to consider an early release day on the homecoming parade day, or to start the parade at 4 or 4:30. So I just wanted to share that with you. There are several comments thanking us that we've now moved to having Martin Luther King as a non-student day. And as always, people ask that we align our spring break with either UW-Madison or Madison School District or Madison College or other neighboring schools. We do talk about that in our Dane County HR directors meetings, and we have tried to move to calendars that have spring break the last week in March so that we can be more closely aligned with each other. But the calendar is a local decision. And so as much as we try to do that, and we do make an effort to do that, it doesn't always line up. So, but we always check UW-Madison and Madison School District and Madison College when we're setting that calendar. The only other comment that I wanted to bring your attention is that we had a handful of people say, please continue to explore year-round school. So I wanted to highlight those comments as well. So based on the survey feedback and discussions with the OEA, I have a final calendar to recommend that was in your packet, which is very close to calendar A. What questions do you have for me?
Any board member have any question of Gina on the recommendation?
I just have a question. So last year I remember Ellen or Carolyn, they brought the two calendars to a student council meeting and just showed the members just like the two different ideas and had them vote on their favorite one. I didn't know if that was something you were interested in, just to see what their opinions are. Just a question.
Sure. Well, and last year was a little bit different because that was the first year we were exploring having the seniors be out earlier, and that was what they were surveying, is if the seniors were interested in being out earlier than the rest. And surprisingly, they were interested in being out earlier than the rest. Yes. So that's why we had that added layer last year. I believe the survey also showed that seniors did not want to take second-year finals. So there was that feedback that they shared as well. And I know in talking with Mr. Pliner, he has a plan for this year. So in terms of what that'll look like for the senior class.
Any other questions of Gina?
Gina, I was wondering if the administration has talked much about moving the homecoming parade, moving that time back. I know that's always a particularly difficult day for staff. Have you guys had a chance to discuss other options there?
Do you want to talk about that? So this is probably the first time that the team is hearing that from me tonight because the survey just closed. So we have not talked about that as a team for next year at this point.
And in fact, one of the things that Brian and I talked about is it's been a while since we looked at the parameters, as a board or a subunit of the board, just to make sure that we're on board with each of those as parameters. And it might be helpful before we go out next year to have one of the committees or a separate one to just kind of review your list to make sure that you're in sync with kind of the atmosphere of the board. And that would include, the homecoming thing is what's the sense there if you're going to go out and develop a calendar, what's the sense of the board relative to that, knowing the feedback that we've gotten this year. Does that make sense to people to have from the board?
Yeah,
Okay.
No, that makes sense because these are either things that I inherited or have been at prior board direction.
Right, and we haven't talked about them in a long time, so we'll figure that down the line, but I think which one it goes to, whether it goes to policy or visioning, I'm not sure. But I think, Troy, in answer to your question, that's one that we should look at. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so no board that Brian and I have talked about that in terms of getting some feedback to Gina from the board on parameters prior to going out and developing the next calendar. Maybe that would include the legislature changing September 1, but I highly doubt it.
But we did do a resolution, I believe, last year.
We did. Yes, WSB. Any other questions? Dan?
Gina, I know that a couple of years ago, as part of something that we did in coordination with other school districts, was to request from the Department of Instruction permission to start school early. Do you remember that?
I do. So that was something. So Dr. Evers had asked school districts if they were interested in starting school earlier to pass the resolution, and we did do that. And so he took those recommendations to the legislature last year to try to have a change to start school earlier. Right now, the way the law is written is that you can only start school before September 1 if you have a true year-round calendar or if you have exigent circumstances such as construction. And but there hasn't been guidance so far in terms of what would actually qualify for a year-round calendar. There are several schools that have asked to start school a little bit earlier in August and end a little bit later in June, and DPI has said that that is not a year-round calendar. But there's some steps you have to take to actually implement a year-round calendar in order for them to consider that request. So those are the only two ways right now for us to start school before September 1. And I know when we were looking at construction, we actually did not want to start school earlier because we needed that time to finish the construction.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the recommendation coming from administration to approve the calendar that is, I think, option A that's before us.
It would be the one before that. It just says calendar, so
Okay.
it's not an A or a
Yeah,
B.
it's the one that's calendar. It's the first one that's with us. Everybody understand which one we're voting on? Or okay. So
to accept the proposed calendar
for the 2019-2020 school year.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Mr. Pankratz with the motion. Any further comments? Seeing none, well, Gina, thank you for doing this and for facilitating the survey and getting us feedback. It's always interesting to read through the comments that we get. It's helpful, and there's a divergence of opinion throughout, but out of that comes some consensus, and I'm really glad that we're in October of 18 approving the 19-20 school year, because that will give our families a chance as they move up on vacation, picking a time off for next year, to have that already in place. I know some years we've been behind that curve a little bit. Tim?
And again, approving this calendar doesn't preclude either policy or visioning from considering, for instance, the change to the school day for the parade.
No, that's not on the calendar.
Okay. All right.
As long as it's a school day.
Okay.
I know if we had a non-school day, then that would be hard for some parents for scheduling. So, but changing the parade time would not impact this calendar.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I think we should take a roll call vote on approving the calendar. And the motion is to approve the 19-20 school calendar as presented by Gina Jonan tonight. Would you call the roll?
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes, we have a 2019-2020 calendar. Thank you, Gina. That takes us to action item D4, which is from policy, and that's policy 436, a recommendation on policy on alcohol and or other drugs. And I will turn the floor over to Krista as the policy chair.
Thanks, Steve. So policy 436, what we're discussing is having random drug dog sniffs in our school district. And as you recall, this was added as a temporary addition to the policy 2 years ago, and then last year the board extended the temporary addition to the policy for another year. And so this came back before policy again this year. And what we wanted to do this year is really be diligent and have a robust discussion about this issue because it is a very complex issue. And so I'll kind of go through our process as policy first before we kind of get into specifics. What we did before we took up the discussion is Tim, Dan, and I kind of developed a list of questions, which also came from other board members about data that we asked to see from Gina and Jim and Shannon and Candace in terms of what has been the data that we've collected from random drug searches since we've done them. What has the data been for the reasonable suspicion searches that we've done over the last few years? What is the data from expulsions and pre-expulsions that included alcohol or other drugs? And whether they were found as a result of a drug dog sniff. What are other Dane County school districts doing in terms of drug dog searches? What is the Dane County Youth Assessment data telling us in terms of our students and anxiety and drugs and alcohol? Comparison to other school districts in Dane County. What is the national research that's out there? And then also, what is the qualitative data? So what are Jim and Shannon hearing from staff members? What are they hearing from students? Because they've all done surveys about this. And then we really got into specifics about the process that occurs when a random drug sniff occurs. So how much time does it take? Who does it? What happens? Is it what parts of the school district are searched? All those sorts of things. And so we had Jim and Shannon talk with us. We had representatives from the police department who are here tonight. Candace talked about how it may impact students that are special ed students. Because we really wanted to hear that. We also talked about the drug dogs themselves and what do they actually sniff for, what is the passing rate, or what is a false sniff, those sorts of things. We talked about who actually searches the lockers and who searches the cars. School staff are the one that search the lockers, and law enforcement conduct the car searches. What happens if something is found, what the process students go through in terms of seeking assistance from the Student Assistance Program Coordinator, that parents are contacted. We talked about privacy issues. We talked about law cases involving drug dog sniffs. So I really just want people to understand a lot of the things that we discussed as a policy committee and that we had a robust discussion. Most of the board members were there. Steve and Barb were not able to join us that evening, but they have had access to all the data too. So hearing from or studying all that data and all the things that we did here, the policy committee does recommend that policy 436 be changed so that 4360303 be added, that the district on a random basis may also employ the use of drug detection canines on Oregon High School and Oregon Middle School buildings, grounds, and parking lots. So I will make that motion.
We have a motion coming from policy as reflected in the document before you. First of all, I'm going to go around and ask if anybody has any questions before we get into, yeah.
Krista, in the language that was sort of temporary, was there a limit to the number of searches that we had in a school year?
No, we did not.
We did not.
We did not.
We did not.
The practice was not more than 2, but we did not put that into the policy.
Okay, and did policy committee discuss that in particular?
Go ahead.
We did, and the discussion was if we said, no more than 2, then once there was a second one, then the kids might think, oh, well, no more this school year. You know what I mean? So, purposely keeping that. I know the first year the direction was to try it and have the 2. And then this year there hasn't been a discussion about a limit.
Any other questions, Courtney? Barb? Tim? Troy? Krista, you don't, because you chaired the... Oh, maybe you do.
Just reporting out.
Okay, Dan, any questions?
I don't have questions. I have comments for.
Okay. I've got a few questions that I'll direct Krista's way. And in terms of when there's an alert, am I to understand that if a locker is alerted by one of the dogs, that then there's also a search of the adjacent lockers. Is that right?
And I will speak to this based on what I've heard, and then Gina can jump in, or Jim or Shannon. My understanding is that if alert happens on a locker, that the adjacent on either side, if there is a locker on either side, will be searched based on ventilation within the locker, and the understanding that that sniff could have alerted on a locker, but it could have been the adjacent based on air ventilation. Is that correct?
Okay. So that would mean that that would explain why when we have a number of alerts in the spreadsheet that we have basically doubled the amount of lockers searched. Okay. When there's when we have a search of the locker, is the student brought down to the locker? They're not. Are they advised that their locker is being searched?
Not during a search, but we let folks know, parents know, as well as students after the fact.
How come we don't let them know when we're searching their locker?
You know, we are trying to best we can protect students' privacy, and when it's really clear that there is a search happening in the hallways, we know there's the potential for there to be multiple lockers that would be searched, and we want to avoid pulling multiple kids out, putting them in front of peers in the hallway, whether we're the dog team.
And how are they informed, the students, that their locker's been searched?
We, when it's concluded, we rally up our teams, and we've got a protocol sheet that lets all of our 8 different teams have the same information so that we're all on the same page. So that we communicate confidential information the proper way over a cell phone rather than a radio. And when it's all said and done, we compile a list of all of the contacts that we had through alerts. We notify kids in person, and we make phone calls to parents.
Okay. So each of the parents are notified then? Okay. And is there a notation placed in their record that there was a hit?
If there is no fine, we don't create a student record.
For any of them?
If there is no fine, we do not create a record.
What follow-up do you do, if anything, if there's a hit on a locker and you search 3 with the students in terms of?
It hasn't been our practice at this point that we have done follow-up investigation based upon a false alert on a locker.
Okay. Do you look at student records to determine whether or not there's any further indices that there would be drug or alcohol usage?
Yep. To this point, we haven't. Using our knowledge and familiarity with our students, we have felt that we haven't had an indication that we had other information from the student's record or our dealings that would have created a higher level of suspicion for us to follow up.
Okay, if you had a level of suspicion that someone's got drugs in their locker, would you be able to search that locker as you understand it under board policy?
If I had reasonable suspicion, if I had credible information as opposed to just suspicion, I could search.
Okay. If there's a backpack in the locker that's being searched, do you look inside that? Okay, that's all I've got, I think, for you guys. There was some data in terms of what other districts do, and the question I had is Fort Madison and Sun Prairie and Middleton don't do this, as I understood the data. Did we get any indication of why they don't?
No, I don't have any in terms of, I think they did not want to speak for their districts for me to share that in open board meeting. So, okay. But they said that their superintendents would talk with Dr. Bussler about it.
Do we have any data from the schools that do searches in terms of how many they do a year?
So the ones that responded to me said a handful. So 1 to 3.
Okay, and did we get any data in terms of what the success rate was in terms of finding illegal drugs in their search? Did we get any of that data?
No, I don't have that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, we have a motion from policy to approve the language that's before us, and so I think I'll walk through and let people make a comment on that as we go through. Courtney?
Do we need a second before we?
No, it's a motion coming from
Committee.
from a committee doesn't. So
So I attended the policy committee meeting where the very thorough discussion occurred. It was a couple months ago, wasn't it, Krista? And I'll just keep my comments brief because I know other people have a lot to say about this. Personally, I don't find compelling evidence to do drug sniffs. I don't think that the rate of positive hits really justifies the invasion of privacy. However, that being said, I know it is a strong recommendation that's coming from our administrators, and the surveys that I read, both of parents and students and other community members, were very strongly in support of this. So based on that, I have given it long, hard thought, and I think I will be voting in favor of the policy as recommended.
okay, Troy.
So I attended the committee meeting as well and have put a lot of thought into this decision. A couple of things that stand out to me and that I was really thinking about was it was brought up in the committee that are kids really ready for police interaction at this age? And now that I understand how our procedure works, in that if there's a hit in the building, the police really aren't involved in the dealing with that student. However, if there's a hit in a vehicle, then the police have direct contact with that student. So in that regard, if a student has their license, they really need to be ready for police interaction. So I'm not concerned about that. The survey saying that the kids really believe that drugs don't belong in school. The administrators are feeling that this is a deterrent. So I'm in support of this policy.
Thank you. I'm part of the policy committee that voted in favor of this. The committee did. However, personally, I didn't. I just want to make that clear. The vote was a 2-1 vote, and I voted against this. And I still oppose this, and there's basically two reasons for that. I was in favor of the 1-year trial the first year, and I was in favor of the extension of the 1-year trial in the second year, because I thought we could gather some empirical evidence to show that this, what I consider to be an invasion of privacy and serious use of administrative time, is going to be worth it in terms of something that we can actually count or look at. I don't think that we've been provided with any empirical data that shows the incidence of drug use or drug possession at the school has either increased or decreased. We haven't been shown any empirical data that has shown that more people have been treated or less people have been treated regarding our students, regarding drug use or drug possession. All we've really been provided with was information about how the procedure has happened in the last 2 years and survey data about people's opinions as to whether or not they think it's okay. That's not enough for me to be convinced that this is useful for our school district. Tim, I'm glad you brought up the whether or not somebody's ready to be confronted by the police. I understand your point about if somebody's going to be driving, they got to be ready to be confronted by the police. The that may be true, but not in school. In school, we want our kids not to have to be worried about that kind of thing. When you're driving, yes, you should be attentive, and you should always be ready to respond to emergency signals or a call to pull over and answer to the laws of the road. But in the school is not a time to be worried about that or considered that you're going to have to answer to the police when your job is to learn. We know through the stories of what has happened over the last 2 years that many students who are, as far as we can tell, completely innocent of anything have been confronted by the police. And in one case, which it gives me pause, and I want to make sure I get the story correct, that a child, a student at our high school, was asked to come out to her car and was taken out there by the administration, not given really any instruction on how to deal with the police, just to say that, well, it looks like there's a hit on your car, here's the police, and then allowed to talk with the police. And this particular child ended up telling the police that her father smokes marijuana in her car. Why does this upset me? I'm really not sure, but I think it has something to do with the fact that the girl felt under such pressure that she wanted to report her father for a crime, which is not something that a DA would ask a child to do. It's not something that a prosecutor would ever ask a child to do about their father unless the child was the victim of a crime. But it's something that's happened in our school district that could have caused, and we don't know whether it has, serious problems in that family because of the pressure that we exerted on that child, or allowed to be exerted on that child, just because they're confronted with a police officer without proper instruction, without practice, without education about what their rights are and in the ways in which they can legally interact or not with police. I would feel much better about allowing this type of a search. I believe it's a search, even though the Supreme Court may have said that dog sniffing is not a search. Our privacy has been encroached upon by the Supreme Court over and over in the last 20, 25 years regarding the ways in which we can be surveilled without our knowledge. But in any case, if we had an education program that instead of telling kids, look, this is going to happen, the drug dogs are going to come through, and we may have to pull some people out of class. I think that's about as far as we talk to kids about this. If we had an education program that said, these are your rights, the best thing for you personally, not the law enforcement community or your community as a whole, perhaps, but the best thing for you personally is just not to say anything. And then we had an administrator who would be with our student during the confrontation with police that would say to the student, remember, we've told you that the best thing is not to say anything to the police. Now, I understand we have police officers here and they do a great job, and it's a hard job. But I'm talking about, and I'm sure they know this, just the presence of a police officer makes many people nervous. It's an authority figure. It's someone who has the ability to punish. And some of our kids have had family who have gone to jail. It's a hard thing for a family. And that is the kind of fear that comes with that. So that leads into my second reason. Not only don't we have empirical data, I'm concerned about the educational component here. We are asking kids to deal with things in school time that are outside of educational activities. If we educated students on this, this might be a good experience for them. Interacting with the police, I think it's a good skill. It's a useful skill. It's a way to have more knowledge about civics. But as a school district, forcing kids into a confrontation with the police without giving them some sort of educational background on their rights is, I don't think, something that I would support in the district, absent empirical data that shows that people are really being helped by this. Just to summarize, though, and to make a point about, I realize that this is it's a program that a lot of people are supporting. And the idea behind it is a great idea. The idea is to keep drugs out of our schools. And it has to be a balancing, though. We can't just say the idea is good, so whatever might advance that idea is something that we need to do, because there's definitely a line somewhere. Do we want to have sniffs as kids come into school? Just drug dogs there waiting for the kids to come into school? Do we want to have metal detectors? Do we want to have interrogations? You can take it to an extreme, certainly, but there is a point. I'm not saying that this is the gulags. I'm saying that this is a step towards invasion of privacy without what I believe is the justification. I would accept postponing for another year or reauthorizing for another year if we had a plan to collect some sort of empirical data. But at this point, I don't support this. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Barb Feeney.
I would really like to be able to vote to approve this, but I don't think I can. I'm concerned about the invasion of privacy issues, pulling our students into a situation with police when I don't see any particular evidence that this has been useful or helpful. And I want to say I have the highest regard for our administrators and their advice on this subject, but I simply cannot go along with it.
Tim.
I, too, am part of the committee, the policy committee that voted in favor of bringing this to the board. I know it's a difficult issue. The issue around empirical data is challenging because that was something that was important to me last year when we extended this for another year. What I find is it's difficult to measure the absence of something. And I think that's what we have. We have, for lack of a better term, the luxury at the moment of having an absence of data that we have drugs in our school, a lot of drugs. And at the same time, I'm not interested in waiting around to have a problem so that we can show we can try to solve a problem we don't currently have. And so that's challenging to me, and I absolutely can appreciate it. And it was one of the reasons that I moved to extend it for another year. And now we're at the end of that year. So that being said, it's still a challenge to me that we don't have empirical data. And so I'm going to leave that right there. I'm not an attorney. But it simplifies.
Two on the board is enough.
It simplifies things for me. But I am a parent. I am a parent, and I'm an elected official and I'm elected to represent the folks who voted for me. And it isn't a close. It's not close. And if it were close, that geez, I hear from half the people that it's not a good idea, and the other half that it's a good idea, I would absolutely vote for a more conservative perspective on this. I would, absolutely. Especially considering the privacy. It's not close. It isn't close from administration and educators. It is not close from most parents, and Dan is a parent, and I absolutely respect his opinion as a parent. But it's not close from what I hear from parents. Our daughter was one of the on the student council who did a vote a couple of years ago to understand what are students thinking about this specific issue as we prepared to extend it for another year. It wasn't even close. And as a parent, I don't want drugs in our schools. So I'm voted to represent my constituents, for lack of a better term, and I don't like that term necessarily. And I'm here as a parent, and I don't want drugs in our schools. And so I absolutely will support this for those reasons. So I would vote in favor of passing this.
Thanks, Tim. Krista?
I have nothing further.
I'm going to take the Raymond approach. I think you guys know that I've been concerned about a lot of these issues that would include video cameras and the proliferation of those. And for a long time, the board's been dealing with the drug search, so you know that I've been pretty involved in that. I really appreciate the process we went through. Thank you, Krista, for shepherding this through and pulling data and doing it in a logical way, because there are people on different sides of it. I hope people understand that there can be different sides to this, and that we as a board take it very seriously about what happens within our schools, both by our students and by what board authorizes in them. And so it's been a good debate. And notwithstanding the fact that I started with a predilection or a starting place of not being in favor of this, going way back from when the board first. I really worked hard at this. I mean, I've got a folder like this. I created a rubric of my thought process in terms of how I was going to view this, and I approached it with an open mind. And events in Madison La Follette were relevant to me in terms of how administration looks to authoritative responses to problems, including metal detectors, and that informed me. So I worked hard at it, and even though some people might think it was an easy decision on mine, it really wasn't. But I'm going to go through you real quick the points. I'm going to vote against this, but give you the reasons why. Number one, we worked hard on a policy way back when to do reasonable suspicion, and I just have never heard a satisfactory explanation of why we moved off of that and why that wasn't sufficient for purposes of changing the policy. I know in our special ed area, sort of like a corollary to this is we always try to find the least restrictive ways to deal with problems, and I thought reasonable suspicion was one way, so I don't know why that didn't work. But moving to the second step, the question then is, going to be effective? And several of you have hit on that. We have data from 2 years of providing that. We've searched 31 lockers and had one hit, and 30 people who were advised and their parents advised that their lockers were searched that didn't have a hit. And So from that standpoint, I don't see an effectiveness. From our use survey in 2015, the report from students in terms of who's seeing kids with drugs in school, the percentage was 42% in 15. After we implemented random searches, that number went up to 50. So, no statistical significant difference in terms of our kids reporting drugs in schools, even after we've had drug searches. And in fact, the reporting of use of marijuana in the last 12 months, that's gone up from 2015 to 2018 when we've had drug searches. So it hasn't had a deterrent effect or an effect on perception of bringing drug to school or being under the influence of drugs. So I don't know that it's can be said to be effective from, Tim, the statistical measures that we look at, okay? If we look at it from a deterrent standpoint, what the deterrent standpoint is, we're going to bring in an extrinsic control model to change behavior, okay? To give you another corollary in the grading area, when we talk about grading and how we grade, we as a board have rejected using those sort of extrinsic control models for changing behavior because they're not effective. And the reason we do it in grading is because if we use that control model in grading, kids find a way to beat the system or way to play with the system in grades, right? Isn't that what we've said? Okay. Same things with the drug dogs. If they're going to search the locker, well, they're just not going to have it in their locker. They're going to have it in other places. They'll find a way around it. So I don't think it's there. More importantly, and I really have violated the Raymond rule, haven't I? More importantly, I've been part of a lot of board papers of fashioning of visiting for the district, and that model is based in a lot of respects on changing from a control model with students to a student-centered self-control model, okay? All we have to do is read our book, The 5 Levers, where it talks about self, and here on page 126 it talks about giving to the students a key element of self so they can control and influence their own environment. I ask in that context, if 50% of our students are reporting drugs within the school, why don't we have a mechanism by which they control their environment and create a culture by which they don't tolerate it, rather than resorting to, I'll defer that to somebody else and bring the authority in to enforce that for them. Going this route's contrary to everything we said in our papers, and that really concerns me. It wonders whether we really have fidelity to that. From a broader sociological area, Tim, this gets to your point. It's that, you don't hear parents saying to you, don't do this. They say, do that. And I'm really concerned that in this society, these forms of random searches or surveillance type activities is becoming desensitized. Not that they're not appropriate in the proper circumstance in that, and I'm not saying I'm against police and how they enforce stuff, but we're seeing a real desensitization to this. And I'm worried about the lack of stops on it and where it goes. It becomes a real slippery slope. 15 years ago, I went back and looked. When we did the video camera vote, we authorized 15 cameras in our district. This building alone has over 50. And we've authorized 11 more through our grant. We now are going to approve a policy that says that we can, on a random basis, may employ the use of drug dogs with no limit on that. That's what we thought 15 years ago about camera, that we set a limit. And we're at 55. That's a sociological creep. And you can take it to a broader context of what's going on in this nation and our resorting to forms of control behavior and to influence thinking that scares me in the long run. Okay? My most deep concern, my deepest concern in this is the total lack of opposition from our student population. regarding this. You guys know I run by the high school in the morning. And I ran by on one of the days that we had the random searches. And the sight of over 5 police cars with uniformed officers taking their drug dogs into our school to do a random search didn't sit well with my stomach. And it concerns me that that doesn't sit well with anybody else from students. I'm just appalled that nobody's objected about this. And that concerns me about where we're going as a country. Thank you. Call the roll.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney? No. Ms. Oderico? Yes. Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
No.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zach?
No. Motion carries 4-3, so we have that policy. Maybe if I turned on my mic. Committee reports. Back to you.
I think we're good for now as policy. We have a meeting coming up end of October.
Vision steering.
Nothing new from us. We have nothing scheduled.
All right. That takes us to informational items. F1 to 18 referendum informational update.
It looks like the update is coming around to all of you. So the purpose of this is to update on activity since the last time I reported regarding communications of the referendum. And that was, last time was our annual meeting, so we didn't have an update. So it's from a couple times ago that I last reported. So the activity since that time was we mailed a newsletter to all households. It was that open up piece that has the map in it. We've had 2 community open houses on the referendum. One was on the 17th of September and one just this past Saturday. The one on the 17th, we had about 15 people, and this past Saturday we had 10 folks join us. We've been continuing to share information in many venues, a number of school events, and they're listed here on your forms that we've done, staff meetings, and then also a number of presentations to groups throughout the community. And then you may have seen recently, we have done some, I'm calling them Did You Know posts on Facebook with just little tidbits of information and facts about the district. And then there's also a video that has been posted on Facebook and that's also on our website. And that is part of a series of videos. It's going to be one a week now until the November 6th. So for next steps, we have one more community open house left. It's on the 15th of October at 6 o'clock at RCI. There's going to be a final postcard mailing to every household within the district. It's going to be a reminder to vote. It's also going to have the map of the school district and a few facts about the district. That's scheduled for the week of October 22nd. We're going to continue. We still have a list of events that we're attending and presentations that we'll be doing. We're continuing the Did You Know Facebook posts as well as the video FAQ series. And we're continually updating information on the district website. So that is a brief update. What questions do you have for me?
Anyone have any questions? Krista?
I just thought it was nice that Emily got into the spirit of the video series and questioned Dr. Bussler. That was pretty cool to see.
And thank you, Emily. That was fantastic. It was nice to have you as part of the video.
I've had a lot of compliments about the quality of not only the materials but the facts in there, and that's helped a lot of people. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on behalf of the district.
Good.
With it, it's been good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Did the feedback from the Saturday group this past Saturday, were there new issues that came up either on the plus or the minus from those that were brought up in the first open house?
I would say we heard similar themes, and Steve and Brian certainly jump in here, but you were both at the session. I thought the themes were very consistent. It was really good discussion.
Really positive. They were informed and had some specific questions, and really were glad that we had answers for them. I thought they received it positively. So, yeah. You know, it was a small group, 10, but they were really engaged and really kind of knew their stuff and wanted to learn a few more. So we'd kind of be on our toes. Anything else? Great. Thanks, Erica.
Sure.
Brian's superintendent's report.
I have 7 items to share with you. And first, I thought I had 2 of these. I do. I'm going to orient you with a picture, and then I'll send it around. This is a picture of walking to Rome Corners by the railroad crossing, and that is soon going to be a fully developed sidewalk. And I'd like to make a shout out to Dave Frankson, who really took this project on, reached out to us a couple of years ago, then reached out to the village, asked Jason Zurwick, Steve as board president, and also me to write a letter of support to the Village of Oregon. And for those of you that are real familiar with the area, there was a sidewalk on one side of the street, not on the other side of the street, and the village did their due diligence and started to build up that area because it had quite a significant slope. And we now have I didn't go by today, so I'm not sure if it was poured yet, but that is a big safety project, and it's just living proof that one person can make a difference, because we've had conversations about that over the years, and I am delighted that piece of safety is now officially there. I don't think I have enough for everyone, but I'm going to get to this in a minute, which is enrollment. But before I do that, I know most of you that have been parents in the Oregon School District at one time or another have gone with your son or daughter to Camp Gray, and we are in full swing of Camp Gray. This week we have our second Camp Gray trip. We have another one next week, and the last week in October. I'm planning on getting to Camp Gray for at least half a day this fall, because it is a wonderful environmental learning experience for our students. What I just handed out to you is a super quick, fast summary that Katie put together for me, and it shows enrollment third Friday count in 2017 and 2018. You'll notice third Friday last year we were just over 4,000 with 4,049, and this year we are at 4,096 students. So we are up 47 students from where we were last year, and last year I believe we were up close to 80 students. So last year was one of our biggest enrollment increases of all time. But when I send you a weekly update at the end of this week, I will check in with Katie and make sure to get the 2016 change.
Brian, with this, when you do that, could you also put in for each of the buildings, at least the elementary and maybe RCI and OMS, the class size, particularly with the elementary?
Yes.
Where we at? Are we at average of two? What are the actual class sizes for each of the classes? Are we at 22, 21? That
Katie already has that done, but it's sitting back on my desk right now. So I can shoot that out to everybody in an email tomorrow, so you don't have to wait for the weekend.
Brian, just also on that, do you know how close this is to what we budgeted for?
I will turn to our expert.
It is less than what we budgeted for, but we have made lots of different budget adjustments, and we'll be fine. We are putting the finishing touches on the budget right now, but we're...
How close is it?
What do we think we were 10 to 13. I think we budgeted 60.
Yeah.
I think we budgeted 60 increase, and we're at 47.
Okay, and really the if there's only one takeaway, our number's up. Our number is not down. It is trending just as Mark Roffer is projected. And in fact, we might be just a smidge higher than what he projected. And the real projection term that he was looking at was 2020, because that was sort of the key piece in the growth task force work. Item number 4, we are busy with referendum presentations and have been traveling around. We had a really large group on Friday night at the Firefly for the Oregon Progressives. I lost count on how many people were there, but I believe over 75. Barb, maybe you have an exact.
I think it probably was over 75.
Yeah, it was a large group, videotaped by at least 2 different individuals. So I'm not exactly sure where that will come out. Although I'm guessing OCA will share that at some time. This week, tomorrow, we are going to Fitchburg Rotary Club at noon at 10 Pin Alley, and Erica's at. I believe that's a noon start time. If anyone wants to join us, lunch will be on the Fitchburg Rotary Club, or I will cover it for you, and we'll do that presentation. Also, tomorrow night's an opportunity for us to touch bases with a lot of community members at the high school parent-teacher conference. So that runs from 4 till 8. We don't have to stay to 8 because most parents that are here at 8 o'clock are making a beeline to a particular teacher. So we don't want to slow them down. 4:30. Thank you, Jim. 4:30 to 8. If you get there at 4, you get to talk to me for a little bit. On Thursday is night 2 of the high school parent-teacher conferences, and also I'll be there for a period of time, and then also heading to the Oregon PTO right here, Netherwood and Prairie View's PTO, and making a presentation there. So lots of items, and if you see one on an upcoming calendar and you'd like to attend, you don't even need to call us. You can just show up. But if you want to give us a heads up, just let Erica or me know, and we will figure out a role for you in that process. If you'd like a role, or if you'd like to be quiet and just observe and listen, you're welcome to do that too. As Steve mentioned last Thursday, off to item number 5, Nathan Johnson and Laura Stoller, the 2 OEA vice presidents, Steve and I, we get together on a monthly basis. It's a project that Dan started with me and the OEA, at that time president, a number of years ago. We've continued to meet for the last 4 or 5 years. I've lost count now. It might be 5 years. We meet once a month and at the Firefly and have a visit about anything that's either party wants to get on the other party's radar screen. So those meetings seem to go super fast. They're 6:45 in the morning, so you got to be a morning person. And all of a sudden it's 7:30 and everyone is off and back to school. Also, a really big celebration that has occurred since our last board meeting. On Friday, September 28th, the Brooklyn PTO had a ceremony recognizing all of the donors. And if you haven't had an opportunity, I think most of you have, had the opportunity to stop by Brooklyn, we have a beautiful playground at Brooklyn Elementary School, and we want that beautiful playground at all of our elementary schools, and they're at a little different points with that. But Brooklyn's parent group took the lead to be the catalyst and get that project started, and it is a very, very fine playground. So nice that the PTO recognized the various donors at a wide variety of levels throughout our community, and again, a great philanthropic experience for our community members. And then lastly, I wanted to recognize Emily and thank her. She is a video star. She came in and just cut right through that copy super fast, and I think was done in 15 or 20 minutes, so no retakes. She has a promising career in communication. So, and I'm forgetting what you're going to school for. Is it nursing?
Yeah, nursing.
Okay. Well, you will be interacting with people, so you are very well suited for that, and the feedback that Erica has heard has been super positive. That we had one of our students involved in in the referendum videos, and we get to shoot 2 more this week, so I'm looking forward to that. Board members, do you have any questions of me tonight, or that will conclude my report?
Thanks, Brian. Future agenda, I don't know, do we have a draft? I didn't think we did.
No, that is sitting on my...
Yeah, and you and I haven't had a chance
Yes.
to run at it, so we'll get that out we'll give it in betweener.
I can give you a couple of big heads up. Andy is going to be reporting on the tax levy and the budget.
Okay.
Remember, that's the typical information that's coming, and he's also going to be making a report on school safety that night. The progress that we've made with the Village of Oregon Police Department, Village of Oregon Fire Department, Brooklyn Fire and Police Department, and conversations we've had with the Fitchburg Fire and Police Department as we update our plan. So I won't let all of that good news out. I'll let Andy share that, although we did get the second grant. I'm forgetting the actual dollar amount, but he'll report on that and respond to any questions you have relative to our safety plan. Because remember, our goal, we need to have the board approve our safety plan before January 1st. And the way we're queuing this up, Andy will do the presentation at the October 22nd board meeting. We'll then come back at the second board meeting in November to give you the near final approval or opportunity for approval. And if there's a few tweaks that you would like to make, that will still give us the month of December with our December board meeting to come back and make one final change so that we're compliant with state law on that important issue.
So at the next meeting, we're going to adopt the budget, approve and adopt it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And just so you know, we'll do 2 tax levies.
Yeah, we're going to do alternate levies, one assuming the referendum passes and one if it doesn't. Okay. Any items on the agenda that any board member would like? If before then you have some, let me know, or Brian. Good, that takes us to checkout. Barb?
I just want to say that I hope all of you saw the article in the Oregon Observer about our very own Andy Wildland being part of a energy forum with Bob Lindmeyer. And the article does a great job of talking about the forward-thinking things happening in our district on the issue of energy. So congratulations. That's great. You're going to be out there and talking about what we're doing.
Tim? Krista? Dan?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention, I mentioned Tessa Riley earlier. She was one of our students who was a board member, a student representative on the board. I've had recent contact with her. She started school at the University of Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, but she's transferred now to Madison. She's studying political science and economics, and she is, just as she was in high school, involved in everything. So she's in a lot of clubs, and she is applying for an internship with the school does a program in D.C., so she wants to do a summer internship there, learning about government, etc. So she's out there, she's impressing people, she's doing a lot of what I think are very important things. She's very involved in the League of Conservation Voters. She was an intern there for 2 semesters while she was in Milwaukee, as well as other things involved in the community and politics. So just wanted to update everybody on somebody that we all probably know a little bit. And that's all I had.
Forgot where I left off. Troy? Okay. Courtney? Okay. Good. That'll take us to a motion to adjourn, but before we do that, thank you all board members for a really good discussion and a civil discussion on the drug dog issue. It was a hard issue for us, and one we most of the time agree, and when we get a 4-3 vote, it's unusual, but it was nice to have the discussion that we did tonight, and we move forward now knowing that's board policy, and it's the board policy for all of us. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Is Tess